and welcome to our third episode of the Rima Advocacy Podcast, where we look at advocacy in contemporary Singapore and dive into how people and community make things happen around the issues that they care about. So after so many conversations previously in this advocacy series, we'd like to expand what we consider advocacy a little bit more. So today we're looking at economic well-being and advocating for other definitions of success. While our speakers may not define themselves as economic well-being advocates per se, today we are having a conversation about what success means and its various conceptions in society. So I think that would be a very interesting conversation to have because from what we know, they are from very different fields. I think success and its definitions is something that we don't really talk about outrightly, also because we know that it is subjective, it is contextual, and it's highly personal, and it differs greatly from person to person. But we also know that certain definitions of success are more highly rewarded than others, such as if you are looking at academic success or if you're looking at financial success. So there's always this pressure to conform to dominant conceptions. So today we would like to explore what would a reimagining of success look like through the Malay Muslim perspective that places importance and emphasis on maybe less material things such as religion or family or personal well-beings amongst other things. So let's get right into it. We'll start off with an easy question. Can you share a little bit more about what you do and your relationship with the idea of success?
Okay. Hi everyone. My name is Abu Sofian and I'm the founder of Zero Consulting. And we are a sales and communication consultancy. At the core of what we do is we help people to communicate their value and to get buy-in. Yeah. So if you are a CEO who needs to speak to influence, to the board or to your staff, if you're a sales professional that needs to pitch and close deals, if you are a founder who needs to get investors to give you money or invest in your business, that's where we stand. For me personally, this idea of success has been pretty much a journey, from working at a call center to working at a kind of somewhat corporate structure, full-time 9 to 5 for about 6 years, and then now starting my own consultancy for about 4 years. It's a bit of a roller coaster, but I think the definitions have changed. Now I would say that I would say there are still two main tracks. I would say two operating systems, if I can use that term. The first operating system would be the kind of like the meritocratic, meritocratic path whereby PSLE, O levels, get a degree, get a stable job, HDB, and then that trajectory, which I mean. No value or moral judgment on that. And then the second operating system would be, what does that mean for us as a Muslim, especially considering the spiritual element of like the idea of knowing God, ma'rifah, or like the idea of khidmah, service, and the idea of community and relationship building. Where does that stand? So it's kind of a struggle even for me. Yeah.
Okay, I'll come back to you later.
Sure.
Because I have questions.
Yeah.
But how about you? Could you share a bit about what you do and your relationship with the idea of success?
Hi, I'm Mysara. I am an artist and I'm currently a full-time arts worker. I work in the theatre industry. Previously, or my first, I guess, like full-time adult job was actually a journalist. So I was a producer with the mainstream media, and then I left to do my masters and got into the arts by accident, I would say. And then in between, I've done other like teaching gigs. I've done like consultancy, consumer insights, all those like corporate stuff. And now I'm in the arts full time. So I don't think I've ever I think in my journey think of it of like, oh, this is what successful means to me. It's more of like, do I feel satisfied where I am at that moment? And I think that more or less kind of like guided my journey. I think where I am right now has always been guided by like, am I making myself happy? Do I feel like satisfied with what I'm doing? Are my parents happy with me? And then that's pretty much it. Like I don't think I grew up really like, I mean obviously like you can't deny how community influences your idea of success, but I think over time, and that's what I've been doing through my artworks, which is to look at how we define ourselves, like it's narratives, whether it's state narrative or state-driven narratives, narratives driven by community, family, individual, and things like that. Yeah.
Okay. Do you think it's hard to define success in the art scene, given that you have been like jumping around like different art scenes, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think if you're in the arts, you don't think about success like conventionally
Right,
in the first
right.
place, right? Unless you're like unless your intention is to be like an artist in possibly, you know, in selling your works, you know, in a commercial gallery, then it might be defined differently, right? But a lot of us do work on commission base, so it is not like so much like, you know, how many people have seen my works, you know, or like how many people have like, you know, like posted it on Instagram, but it's more of like what are the conversations that have come out from my works. Yeah, and I think that has been always the angle for me, at least, and a lot of the artists that I know personally. Yeah.
Okay, so that's a very different definition of what success, because I think it's more non-material in that
I mean,
sense.
the idea of arts and subculture is always to kind of like, you know,
Counterculture.
go against
Yes.
the norms, right, in the first place. So I think the moment you start thinking, obviously not to say that we don't think about money. Money is always a conversation in the art scene, right?
Definitely.
Funding,
Yes.
things like that. But I think the work itself, you know, a lot of time is to stir conversations to get the community to think about things in a different way. And I think that has always been the source of motivation for us.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I think it's an interesting dichotomy because like even when I explore art, right, I felt that it's like the craft is the work itself, but then when you are in a kind of in quote unquote like capitalist society, it's like profit is the work, you know, making money is the work, and then the struggle of trying to make sense of that, because like what does that mean for us if we just want to write a poem just because it makes us happy, or like create a production like this even though it doesn't bring any economic benefit, right?
I think that's interesting because I remember this is a personal anecdote. So my friend, she's very good at crocheting, and then after that, I think multiple people have asked her, why don't you make a business out of it? But she's like, I don't want to spoil my art just because I want to make money. So I think, yeah, to her, success is like personal satisfaction. Do you think there is a coherent definition of success within the Malay Muslim community? And does it diverge from national definitions?
No, so that's my answer only because I think it is a problem when we start defining things racially, right? I think if people are aware of my work, I think I've always problematized the idea of racializing issues, like how we racialize social issues, socio-economic issues into like this is a Malay Muslim issues, as if people from other communities are not facing the same thing. Same thing as like I think when we talk about success, right? Or when we define what is the definition of success for a Malay Muslim, it definitely differs from individual to individual because it depends on the parameters that you've kind of like grown up with or exposed to, you know, whether it's like family, community, you know, I don't think my definition of success would be the same as his or yours, right? And the wider like Malay Muslim community, because if we were to bring in, let's say, faith or religion, for example, right? Like, okay, you know, my idea of success is to be a good Muslim. You can also apply that to, like, you know, people of other faiths, right? I was just having this conversation with a friend who's also an artist who is Hindu. And, like, yeah, you know, they will also have the same, I think, experiences growing up as artists in their own community. So I don't think there's, like, a coherent definition of it. It's just really the parameters that you as an individual like grew up with, you know, because I might actually have the same or similar definition of success as someone outside the Malay Muslim community, right? And that is something that like we also need to kind of like acknowledge and recognize.
That's very interesting. Recently I had a conversation with someone who is the former CEO of a bank, and then he told me, you know what, Sofian, the problem with our community these days is that they try to make a Muslim car. We should just make a car. Why are you trying to make a Muslim car? Just make a car, right? And I mean, if you're an engineer, you wouldn't want to make a car just for Muslims because your skills are very much it's relevant across a set of, you know, different values and different races and religion. So I think that's a great point. I would believe that probably in terms of the national narrative, of course, as I mentioned just now, there are certain markers of success. Let's just not just put race. Let's say our community in general. Probably there's a bit of a tension whereby, let's say someone does well economically, right? And then there would be a kind of a conversation on, oh, does that mean that they're kejar dunia? They're just chasing the world. It's just a worldly success. If they try to climb up the career ladder, whatever that looks like for the person, it could be an artist that wants to maybe sell the piece of painting for $1 million, does that mean that they quote unquote sell out? If you pursue some form of monetary value to your craft, right? What does that mean if you are also trying to be a Muslim that is quote unquote sincere? Do we ascribe to the monetary value for the amount of work and craft that a person, a time the person has spent into a craft? If I use another context, let's say you're a religious teacher, right, and you are supposed to perhaps teach Iqra. You go to someone's house, and the hourly rate is X. What does it mean if I say my hourly rate is, let's say, $500? Does that mean I am less quote unquote sincere if a person comes up to me and they say that they don't have enough money to pay for that? What does that mean for the person? And on one hand, they've worked hard to in that craft. They studied overseas, with masters of the craft. On the other hand, there is a market rate, so to speak. So there is, again, I think the word for me has always been about this tension, a personal struggle for me as well, especially when as a business owner, we try to put a monetary value to the services that we provide. Again, right, I think it is a deeply nuanced conversation depending on the context. But in general, what I'll say in terms of the coherence of it all is that it's like, what does it look like to align our identity, our impact, and our income? Can all of the three be aligned? Right? Can you still make the income? Can you still maintain your identity that you want to hold on to, right? And make the impact, that community impact, whatever that looks like for you. Yeah.
I think my question arises from the fact that a lot of data is very racialized as well. Because you see, when we look at, for example, median income household, and then we look at it, there's the national average, and then there's the Malay average, and then there's the people from other races. So I think the whole CMIO way of looking at data really makes us look at our community like we are lagging behind, but I don't think that that's the case. Where might these conceptions of success within the Malay Muslim community or the national definitions of success comes from?
I think, like I've said earlier, for me, I think it's really guided by the parameters of like what you've grown up, right? Like the newspapers that you've read, your National Day like rally speeches, what your teacher says to you in class, what your parents say to you in class. Also, I think like drawing to what you said just now, also the fact that and also what you said about how there's data is racialized, right? And that's why I think humanities, social sciences, and arts is very important. But again, these three aspects are not really as valued as STEM in our community, right? And then we wonder like how come we don't appreciate culture, we don't appreciate the arts, or why are we racializing issues, and we don't understand why these ideas of success come about. I think when the structures itself are built in a way that certain industries or ideologies are valued, whether it's like monetary or in other forms, more than the others, I think that's where the imbalance comes about, right? If people look at data as just like numbers and take it wholesale and not understand the underlying issues behind it, that's also a big contributing factor to how we think as a society and as a community. And I don't think that, I know people might argue and be like, oh, no, actually, but I think it has changed over time. But when I was doing my thesis, I don't think things have changed. Maybe the language might have changed a little bit, but the underlying of messaging that we've been receiving over the past few decades has always been the same, which is there needs to be more that needs to be done. But again, I think my question then is, what is this idea of doing more in the first place, right? What kind of validation are we as a community actually seeking? And also, am I less successful because I'm not working for profit? Am I less successful because I'm not interested in having a corporate job, doing philanthropy, but I'm much more interested in relooking at system, rebuilding or recreating systems that needs changing, right? And also, I think as artists, a lot of times the worry that we get is, cukup makan ke? Like, are you gonna earn a lot?
Yeah.
But I beg to differ, and I be like, I think artists are the people I know who are actually very financially responsible, because we work by commissions, right? And a lot of them do have families to support, and that doesn't mean that just because you don't have a 9 to 5, we are not successful in financial planning, for example, right? I think it's a wrong idea to assume that people who have 9 to 5 jobs are
Have
not
it
in
together.
debt, right? Yeah. So, yeah, and I think I might go deeper into this, because I think I do see it as a structural issue in terms of like how we define success. Like, right, okay, you see us as like artists as not being financially responsible, or not be defined as like having a CPF. I mean, I have a full-time job, so I have a CPF, but like a lot of the freelancers don't have CPF or whatever, right? But also like, a lot of institutions are not paying us on time.
Okay.
Right? And that's things that we need to talk about, right? Going back to what he talked about, value in labour, unpaid labour as well. Yeah.
I want to offer something, because she went into the structural route, right? There's a scholar that said that we should not just be chasing equality of opportunity, where the general consensus is equality of opportunity, you know, SES, right? But he said for Muslims, it's the equality of opportunity for salvation. In that it's not just about the SES aspect, the socio-economic status, what you own, the material stuff, but it is about the idea that men and women compete in their closeness to God, in their pursuit of that perfection, of becoming the best version of themselves, right? And arts is a beautiful way to go deeper into yourself. Poetry, music, you know, culture, you know, drama. Yeah, so I think I'll echo what Mysara mentioned, which is the narrow definitions is definitely a problem. And it's surprising when you mentioned that not much has changed, you know. And I mean, she's the scholar, right? I'm here just riffing off from you. But yeah, maybe what I'll say is, on the flip side, let's look at the people who are pursuing the capital gains and you know all of that. We have the people who are C-suite execs, people who are climbing that corporate ladder. At the same time, you have the people who do not subscribe to that form of capital gains, but they are the financial advisors, they are the realtors, they are the people who do not work the 9 to 5, so to speak, but some of them are earning a pretty decent amount of money that they would not have earned in a 9 to 5. And probably we could attribute it to the fact that certain industries reward relationship building, the idea of amanah, holding on to amanah, the idea of, you know, that connection. So, for example, a realtor, I choose that realtor because they resonate with my values. They are looking out for me. They are not there just to get the biggest commission. So that's why I want that realtor. And the realtor will also benefit because, again, it's not a 9 to 5. They can have time with their family, go to mosque to pray, and at the same time, they can have a bit of that semblance of balance, so to speak. I can have the uncapped income. I can be good in a craft, and at the same time, I can be there for my family and, you know, pursue my hobbies. So there are people that I've seen with our clients who are pursuing alternative forms of wealth building and purpose and that sense of fulfillment.
A lot of people who are not in, like, I guess, the corporate like world also, I think the question for us is like, what do we do with what we earn, right? I think I also want to highlight the fact that during COVID, you see a lot of mutual aid pop up, and these are actually started by a lot of like freelancers, artists, people who already have their income affected, right? Who may have had, like, I think a lot of projects cancelled, right? And but still, you know, people were like stepping up till now, and I think the focus, you know, for us as success is like, you know, whatever gains we have from our projects, like what are we using it for? Because at this day and age when genocide is happening, like does it really matter if you're earning like 100k, you know, or what do you do with that 100k, right? And I think that for us also is that sense of urgency in that, you know, like try and bridge that, hey, you know, like we're trying to create a new work, but also there's all these things that's happening in the world, and we cannot simply like ignore them and move on, like, you know, like continue our lives like nothing is happening. So I think that is currently what I'm feeling. I think currently what my peers are feeling, you know, we are sitting here, by definition, talking about success is because the organization itself has a specific idea of success, right? Like the fact that the two of us are seated here, I don't know whether I've ever seen like a proper or like a discussion about success with, let's say, your abang Grab, food delivery, because they don't fit the idea of success to a lot of like people. So I think that's that also, right? I think this day and age when all these things are happening, like, what is the purpose of having this conversion of success also, right? Like, do we as a community want to have that continued monetary idea of success? If so be it, right? But I think for a lot of us also is beyond, I think, money.
Okay, based on your conversations with people or your observation, do you think maybe our community is more open to these different definitions of success? Or do you, because you said there hasn't been progress, right? What hasn't changed or what has changed?
Okay, I think the state's narrative of progress or like how they define progress for us has not changed. Internally, I think the community has always been more or less like open to it. But again, like I kept saying, like it's really defined individually. I think we're definitely much more open to like alternative ideas of like success, or not following the like go to JC, NUS, and then whatever, get a like nice paying job, a nice HDB or condo if you made it. So I think that we also recognize that there's different means of success, and there's different like definitions of success, not monetary, for sure.
I would like to quote a rough statistic from AMP. I believe last year there was a convention, and you quoted that Malays or our community was underrepresented. I believe less than 10% in 3 industries: tech, financial services, and professional services. Right? And then I wonder, when I look at the statistics, I wonder why. Why is it that we are underrepresented there? What does that mean? Because when I work with people in tech, and then when I work with look at the tech space, if you look at Indonesia, the top students there, they say that they don't want to work under somebody. They want to start their own tech startup. They want to do something that adds meaning to community by their own terms, right? And I believe the new generation of founders in the tech space, they've managed to redefine success based on their own terms in that way. Financial services. Why are we still underrepresented in banking and finance? Well, I spoke with one kind of graduate in finance, SMU, and he told me something. He said, "You know what, Sofian, I can't find a mentor in the financial industry space." And I'm like, well, there are. You can go to this organization XXX. And then the person said, yeah, but there are not many of them. And I can understand what the person meant. A lot of these experienced people in the finance world, at the very least, like the former CEO of a bank that I mentioned, they are not at your networking sessions at MES. They're not there. They are not in those rooms. Some of the founders I know who are 7-8 figure founders, they specifically tell me that they don't go to those events. Right? So therein lies the lack of access for people who are aspiring for some a different pathway, but they can't find the role models, the access to that. So I guess the narratives needs to change. Media probably plays a part in it. I wish we would read more in our newspapers about capital markets, about how this entrepreneur franchised the business and now they have a CSR arm. So it's interesting to see how there are people, as I meet, who are kind of challenging these norms, and they are doing their own work in their little space.
In your research, Mysara, have you come across any papers or academic work that talks about why certain industries may be underrepresented for, I guess, certain communities? Okay.
So my research has always been looking at how the mainstream media portrays the idea of like progress in the Malay community, right? Not so much like whether this industry is represented or not. And a lot of it has been defined by whether we the statistics of like how many people are in jail or out of jail, relapse, never relapse, right? And then when it comes to the slightly more positive, like articles, it's always, you know, people of it is of course like people of a certain industry that is highlighted, right? And I think it has always been, hey, you know, this person has went through this and that in life and they've made it. So can you. But structural issues again, you know, have not been like addressed, right? And it is largely, I think, like ignored, or like what you've mentioned earlier, data has been like racialized, so that we kind of internalize, oh yeah, you know, it's a community problem, like memang orang Melayu macam gini, you know, we're not gonna like progress. We have one person who succeeded, like great, amazing, you know, the rest of you should learn from them. But not that we don't acknowledge the progress, or we don't celebrate the progress of the community, but you know, I think we need to go beyond that very superficial, you know, levels of celebration or like criticism, you know, because then it's become a very individualistic like issue rather than a structural issue, right?
I'll refer from you. I totally agree. So the question is, what are those structural assets, right? Rather than do one event and then it's over. So, for example, in the business world, this looks something like this: you pool you pool money together from different investors from our community, and that capital is to be seed funding for a group of youths that wants to pursue entrepreneurship, wants to become an artist, and they want to kick off their career. So some of the assets I believe that we still need to build up. Number one will be networks. Can we link the mentors with the mentees? Can we link the coaches with the coachees? Right? And perhaps someone who is already in management or C-suite level in a corporate, can we quickly link them up from very early on? And not just that, you know, but get them a spot to work at the company. So I think that's missing. Like, you can link people up. There are a lot of networking events, but the missing link, I believe, is can you actually get them a job there? Because that's where we cover up that gap, right? It's not just the vanity metrics or the optics of like, hey, we just did a networking event, but how many of those people who went through that program actually got a job at X company that's an MNC and a revered company? So that's one. So it also looks like opening doors for people. And also, of course, the early capital that perhaps our community might not necessarily have that. So in US, for example, they have this thing called the SBA loan, right? But in here, because we need Sharia compliant financing, an entrepreneur that wants to buy a business and flip it, for example, they do not have the financing options. So when you talk about structural issues, there are also financing lapses that we don't have. We don't have those options. So therefore, that those bigger moves are out of reach, especially the moves that are like higher up the value chain, right? Rather than going for the low margin, the industries, there are certain industries that are much higher margin and makes you a price maker rather than a price taker, right? So some of the access to those industries are not necessarily within our reach.
I think, like, to encapsulate what you said, I think the role of social capital and like networks is very important. But then also, like going back to narratives that we have, right? The way that we, for example, even define professionals, is very limited to me as well. I mean, do you consider yourself a professional? Yes.
I don't know. Like, again, I think because I don't define myself by like very corporate capitalistic labels, you know. Sure, we have like labels at job when we have to like deal with like funding and grants and like, you know, to make things a little bit more professional. But I think like as an artist, no, like we don't define ourselves by that. But also I think like to touch on what you've said, right? I think what I feel is like even like our whole conversation has been like talking about success, and like the angle is a certain thing, right? Like, okay, how do you like reach that? You know, let's talk about like social capital and networking, you know, but we also know that it's a very privileged position to be at, to be able to network and have that social capital. And sometimes if you have a different ideology from the masses, you're also isolated from that, right? From having that kind of like social capital, and that's something that I think we don't like necessarily like talk about. And I think it's this chase of like, no matter how we try to package it, it's this chase of like the end goal is to, you know, to open a business or whatever, great, you know, but we don't talk about the process, right? And that we need to be able to let people move at a pace that they're comfortable with, right? If they have not opened a business in like 20 years time, but getting there, great. You know, if you don't have a degree at this age but you're pushing, or like you want to study again in other forms, also great, right? Maybe you don't have, like, maybe society might not deem you as like book smart, but you are able to support your family in a very healthy, happy environment. I think that is a form of success as well that we don't talk about right now. I think at the end of the day, no matter how, because of how the structures are of how this country is, or anywhere the world really is right now, you know, we tend to steer the conversation of success to something that is very like monetary, and understandably so, right? Because financial concern or economic, you know, well-being is something that everyone is concerned about. But I think in that pursuit or that chase, we don't talk about the process itself. Yeah.
What's interesting is that there's a scholar, Sheikh Abdul Hakim Murad. He said that the purpose of society is to produce saints. And I remember seeing that quote when I was at Wardah Books. I was like, this is a very interesting quote. It was actually the quote that got me to want to study sociology. And then when I looked deeper into the quote, right, to produce saints, right, or people who are close to God, right, it resonates with what Mysara is saying, which is that doesn't mean you drive a Lamborghini. That doesn't mean you have a condo. That doesn't mean you are even a professional working 9 to 5. It doesn't mean you're an artist that's acclaimed. It doesn't mean that you're a filmmaker that's Emmy nominated. You know, when I look at the root, at the core of what it means, right, from the scholar's quote, which is to produce saints, someone who's just close to God, someone who aspires to be towards becoming the best version of themselves, becoming more human, right? To me, I try to make sense of this conversation by looking at the gems of wisdom that I can, that has withstood the test of time. Right? For example, when we were in Senegal, I remember we did for some korban, and we were giving out the korban. I remember that it was about 2 a.m. in the morning when we arrived. We went up to the residence. The students picked up our luggage, heavy luggage, up to the 3rd floor. And when our toilet was choked, they unclogged the toilet. Every morning, they would serve us 2 loaves of French loaf bread, tuna, orange juice. And after breakfast, they will sit and they'll read some what we call diwan, or poetry, spiritual poetry. And I got to know that these students will Hafiz Quran. They will Hafiz Quran and they also memorize the hadith. And the final step of their quote-unquote growth or evolution is khidmah, or service. Like what is you talk to us, I mean, you talk to them about like, hey, you're not successful. Like, what would they say to you, right? Like, to them it's about service. It's about service to humanity. And having said that, there is, despite the dichotomy or the pull, the tension between individual autonomy and the structural barriers, a one way out is, for me at the very least, is just to work on both, right? So if you're a person of power and you can affect the structures, you should, creating assets that I mentioned just now. And having said that, I think the individual agency is still very important. And that hard work is still very important for whatever craft you want to do. I mean, even if you throw out the definitions of success that society imposes on you, you still have to, work on your craft, right? And if the craft itself is the end of everything, then just do the best, create the best cup that you can. I mean, look at this beautiful cup, right? Like, create the best cup that you can. Like, to me, that is being a craftsman, and that is the end itself, which is the process.
I'm hearing a lot of how religion grounds you, and that's how maybe you find balance. But a question I have is, how does certain markers of traditional success, such as financial security, we know that that's undeniably necessary, right? We need the capital to do and move forward in life. But how do we find that balance, and what are some actionable steps that you personally take to balance cultural conceptions of success with needs?
I think it's all part of like adulting, right? Trying to figure out how much you need to like save and pay off like student loans and things like that. I think for me, what is more important is like, in the long run, the works that I've done, like, where would it bring society to, right? And I think, talking about faith, I think for me, as like a Malay Muslim artist, what is also important is like, we tend to forget that, yes, Islam is a religion, but Islam is also a social justice movement. And that came before the rituals, right, historically. And we tend to forget that, because then it becomes a very individualistic, even if we talk about faith, in whether it's in the arts or like a business. It's very like individualistic, and yes, your relationship with God is very important, but also so is your relationship with your community. And that is what I think I find more interesting, and I think that is what in my work I'm looking at, right? What does this idea of like community means, and not in a necessary like, are we willing to give and not think about what we'll get back at some point, right? What are we willing to change? How do we form community? Who is excluded from this idea of like community as well? Success would be able to kind of like build that community, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing she mentioned community. If you look at our predecessors, right, the likes of our first Attorney General in Singapore, right, Tan Sri Professor Ahmad Ibrahim, right, or likes of the ones who founded Jamia, right, these were people who did so much. They created the Women's Charter, things like that. I try to find role models as much as I can in an attempt to answer that, or try to figure out that that question. And I actually found certain people. For example, there's a couple, Khalid and Ainun. They set up this organization called the Saut Ilahi. They organize a mental health conference every year. It's called the Sacred Path of Love. And every year they bring in scholars, psychologists, and we talk about mental health, like loneliness, depression, divorce. Which is, when I came out from Muslim society, I was very idealistic and starry-eyed, wanted to save the world kind of thing. But then when I met and I heard stories of what people actually went through, it shocked me. So I look at role models of people who are trying to create spaces where such conversations can happen, and I believe in whatever capacity you have to create those spaces, if you can, based on whatever that you have.
Yeah, so both of you are from spaces that may not be conventionally pursued, right? So what are some of the things that both of you have had to negotiate or reconcile in your line of work? And also, do you think there has been unsaid expectations or criticisms that come with the path that you've chosen?
That I think one thing that every artist will have to reconcile is that institutions do not understand the way you work. People want your artwork, people want your labor, but they don't understand that, or even the community, right, doesn't understand that we are trying to also ensure that our collaborators are paid fairly, right? I think a lot of people don't realize that people in the arts have to fork out a lot of our money first.
Yep.
I would love to see, I think, better structures, or like better, more leeway for artists, or more trust in us, I think, in being able to get the financial aspect of it, or like money first before we like create our art, right? And understand that, or there's this assumptions by institutions like, okay, you're an artist, you don't have anything else to do, right? So we can delay this, you can delay that, you can delay your contracts, and then but we expect you to feed it within the same deadline. And that's very, very frustrating, I think. How do you want, forget the the corporate world, right? Like, how do you want your artists to flourish? So I think also more understanding and more support in that aspect lah. Because I think as people in the arts, we've also had people be like, macam, like, I would rather donate to the masjid because I can, like, I know the pahala is there,
Right?
and then like, what can you say, right? You can be like, you can't be like, no, you still get pahala if you donate to us. We can't, right? And then especially if your works are a bit more, I won't say controversial, but like, critical of like structures and stuff, right? So people like to play safe, I think, and understandably so, especially when it comes to faith. So I think that is something that a lot of us are negotiating, and I would love, I think, in when we talk about success in the arts, is for more space for, I think, Malay artists to kind of just like experiment what art is in the first place, because I think we love art as a community, right? I mean, that's why the running joke is that every Singapore idol, is Malay, right? Can we also then form more support for young upcoming artists who are experimenting or doing a different form altogether? Yeah.
Interestingly, 2 out of the 3 Singapore idols are now realtors
Yeah.
at the same time. So it's interesting, right? How their journey also kind of grew. I would mention in terms of negotiation, right? The first one, negotiating your credibility. Because as a pretty young chap going into an industry where there are many veterans, it wasn't easy. They will question your credibility, like who are you to become a coach? Who are you to start this? And I would get DMs when I first started, like of someone who's much more senior and saying this kind of stuff. I'm like, who is this guy? I don't know who this guy is. Just drop me a DM. It's like, okay. And it did affect me a lot. And then you just have to keep going. So there's a huge credibility gap that we kind of have to negotiate. I believe social media has helped a lot in terms of scaling our impact. But at the same time, I struggle with proofs because we created a framework called promise proof, right? I can make a promise, but can I back it up with proof? So as a result, I've doubled down on proof a lot versus making promises. Yeah, so credibility gap is huge. But with LinkedIn, with social media, with certain platforms, it can help a craftsman, an artist, or a professional, or whatever you define yourself as, to kind of get access and visibility. So LinkedIn has helped a lot for myself. The second thing I had to negotiate is, I would say, the pricing gap. Pricing, the idea of premium pricing. So that pricing gap is another one. The ability to just price it at whatever the market is paying and then have the proof to back it up to match that. The last one is visibility gap. And the reason why I say that is because there's this tension of, I'm not sure whether you've heard of it, where people will be like, I tak nak post kat social media pasal I takut nanti ada evil eye. I mean, if you're an artist and you want people to enjoy your work, right, you definitely want more reach as well, right? But then there is a narrative where there's evil eye. But here's the thing. Our scholars, the likes of Habib Ahmad Mashhur Al-Haddad, mention that people always talk about the evil eye, but they fail to look at the good eye. The good eye exists. The good eye is the gaze of the scholar or the saint or, the wirid or the protection. Why is it that we over-index on the evil eye and under-index on the good eye? So when we talk about visibility, right, there's the idea of, is it riak? If you talk about your services, if you promote your services, is it vanity? But I believe that to manage that tension, I just say that I'm here to benefit, and it is a business. There is a price and visibility over vanity. And the visibility helps a lot of our entrepreneurs, founders, and professionals who are trying to get into certain markets.
To hop on your point about the evil eye, do you think that exists in
Have I posted anything and I got people the next day? I think for me it's more of like, if I do share my works, like my recent work would be because it's a collaborative work, right? And also I think because I am a research-based artist, a lot of my works are there to kind of like relook at narratives, and I want people to have that conversation, right? So it's like, hey, this is what I'm talking about, like you all have a conversation lah, kan? But so I don't think about it like that way, whether it's riak or not, right? Like I'm paid for it, right? And I think the institutions would want me to like kind of like promote it themselves. But at the end of the day, like whatever work I do, it is meant to strike a conversation, and for that conversation to happen, like visibility lah, people need to know that it is there. So like that's how I see it.
Okay. What do you want the future of success to look like in Singapore and maybe for our community?
Honestly, like you do you. It's really that as long you're not harming people, you are creating spaces, I think, for other people to be heard as well. Your intentions are like, your niat is there, your niat is baik, then to me it's really just do what you think is best for you.
I think it's so interesting that, because you said you do you, right, means that everybody's definition of success is very personal. But then also our definition of success also involves like the community. Like we have to like give back to the community or make the community think or be more critical about certain things. I think that's so interesting to me.
I think and I think definitely you're right, the contradiction might be there, but also I think because at the end of the day, like if you're doing something for the community, I'm not going to dictate to you what you should be doing as a person. If your idea of success at the end of the day is to earn a certain amount, but it also depends on exploiting a certain community or like the working class, then that's on you. Like I think we're all like adults and smart enough to know what's right and what's wrong, right? My job as an artist is to make people think or encourage people to have that conversation with me, right? And it doesn't have to be like in extreme moments where like, we have like to dismantle structures, and yes, I've done like I've talked about that before, but it's also small little things. Like if I can like isolate a bit, like my recent work at MHC and Malay Heritage Centre is looking at women in the film industries, right? When we talk about golden age of Malay cinema, we think about P. Ramlee, Jane Samsudin, but we don't know that a lot of women in the industries were also filmmakers and producers. Like Maria Menado, who just passed away just now, also formed her own production company. So she is successful by a certain definition as well, but we don't look at it because of like gendered expectations and things like that. So it's small little things like that, So I think at the end of the day, success is also taking that step to kind of like relearn what you know and look at the world in a different, I guess, like point of view.
Yeah. I think you could take almost any point of reference. Personally, I take the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said, the best of you are those who are most beneficial to others. Right? In that sense that whatever you, in your capacity, can you help somebody? And I'll zoom in first, right? For example, I'm a father. I have 2 children. If I throw away all the definitions of career, right? Honestly, when I come back home, I just care about my kids, man. Whether they turn out to be good, responsible, good-natured, empathetic human beings that don't harp on other people's rights, they are kind to others. And then me as a husband with my wife, right? You could be somebody outside, but at home, nauzubillah min zalik. So, so it's like me as a husband, and then with my wife, and supporting her through pregnancy, through our journey together. There are different phases. What does that look like? Because for me, being a successful husband, it also involves the division of labor at home, which is you got the dryer, you got to dry the clothes, you got to fold the clothes. I don't like to fold clothes. I like to hang it instead. You got to wash the dishes, you got to vacuum the house, and this is what we call informal work, right? They call it in academia. So it's like, I think as a husband also, honestly, when you throw out everything else, when you come back home, at the end of the day, it's got to start there for me, at least. My kids, my wife, if that's taken care of, then I kind of zoom out one step at a time. Yeah, but honestly, even if the world is burning down, you're like, for example, you did a bad deal, nauzubillah, you're in debt or whatever, right? Or something happened in your career, you come back home, is the ones who will love you, the ones who hold you and who would support you. This could also be a trusted confidant, a trusted mentor or guide that can walk with you and accept you for who you are, basically where you are at. So for me, I mean, how I would phrase how I answer that question is more of like, focus on love at the core of it, because I don't think we talk about love as much in our community. I think we are a lot about rights. We are a lot about my rights, your rights. We are a lot about, which is important, by the way. And if you are in any domestic violence situation, you gotta report, right? Because side quest. There are cases where they would not report about it because just sabar. That's not right. So rights are important, but where I'm coming from is we need to talk more about like love, like really care for one another. And what does that mean?
Personally, for both of you, what is next for you in advocating for a future with a definition of success that is more broad?
I am writing a new script as well for residency, but
Nice.
I think I don't see my works as like advocacy for success per se. More of like let's relook at how we looked at ourselves over many years, right? And I think I don't know, like what kind of works I'll be producing, 2, 3, 10 years down the road. But I would imagine it will always be in the realm of reimagining ourselves and like that whole process of unlearning and relearning our history, our relationship with the community, with faith, with family, and I think at the end of the day, with how the world is really, I think hopefully for like justice.
Yeah. For us as a company, we see ourselves impacting the business education landscape here in Singapore. So we are organizing a summit. It's called the Before the Win Summit. So the idea is to elevate the conversation on what it means to run a business. Yeah, and we call it Before the Win because we believe that success is not just about the titles and the achievements, but it's who you become in the process of that. So for example, even our company, right, I named the company Sero Consulting. Sero is from the Arabic poem Sero Kalb. It's not sir, but ser, which is journey. Because the idea is it's a journey that you get to. It's who you become in the process, not necessarily the result, right? So you might not necessarily become that doctor, that lawyer, whatever title, CEO. Tapi in the process, I became someone who's a lot more empathetic, a lot more kind, a lot more considerate. Then that is the win. Right. Having said that, we language it in a way because of commercial and corporate, because that's what market responds to. But there is the underpinning that is the idea that it's not about the titles, even though that's what the market is telling you. Let's open up the conversation beyond that.
So my final question is, any advice for those who are still carving out their own path in negotiating culture, success, and maybe financial security?
I think it's okay to fail or like figure out like halfway that this is not the path that you want to take and try something new. I think how we've been conditioned to think is like, like once you go down this route, you should stick to that route, right? But that's, I don't think that's always the case, and if you're not happy where you are at, there's if there's opportunities elsewhere, you should try and grab it if you can. But also I think going back to what I've said before, like find that community as well if you can. I think that helps a lot in feeling less alone and getting like support. Yeah.
I think it's also part of like exposure therapy, right? Like if your community like also fails along with you, or like I think it's easier to swallow it. Yeah.
Yeah, none from me, but more of I point towards a scholar, Sheikh Ibrahim Skritama from South Africa. He mentioned something very interesting. He said when you are born, all you do is take. You want milk, you want someone to change your diapers, you want attention. But when you die, all you do is give. You have no choice but to give. Your property, your life, you leave behind your loved ones. So therefore, he said that maturity from the time you're born, when you're taking, to the time when you die, which is you have no choice but to give, maturity is how eloquently you can lose things in life. As you mature, it's how well you can lose those things. I'm no longer the CEO. What does that mean for me now? So that's maturity. Or I was married, now I'm divorced. What does that mean for me? Right? Or I used to be popular in school, now I'm no longer that. What does that mean for me? So how you deal with these things in life is your form of maturity. So I think it serves a very useful advice for me, because we know that we will lose things in life. The idea is when that happens, that is part of the process of maturation. Yeah.
Okay. So I think from our conversation, like because you're from different fields, of course you would have different success metrics. You said yourself that maybe you don't even use the word success to define your work, right? At the end of the day, you are the one defining the success for yourself. And going back to like the bigger structure of what we are talking about with regard to success in the community, I think it's very important to take a step back and look at yourself as an individual, and then like going back to your intentions, try to benefit the community as you go along. I think it's good to have more voices on the table. There's not only just us, maybe. Invite people of different backgrounds to find out what their definitions of success is. Thank you, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you.